Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we are doing the palette tag. This is a tag that was created by Samantha March and Allie Glines, and basically we're going through my palette collection and I'm telling you which ones are my favorite, my least favorite, my most expensive, my least expensive, worth the hype, not worth the hype. I'm so excited. I know palettes, at least for me, are one of those things where I feel like it's worth it to spend a little bit more money because the shadows last forever, and if they work really well, then I don't know. I have a little bit of expensive taste, but it's just interesting to see everybody else's thoughts on different palettes. Okay, I'm gonna stop talking and let's get started. Okay, first question is your newest palette. My newest palette is this one right here by MAC Cosmetics. This is the MAC and Selena collaboration that just came out a couple of months ago. I haven't had a chance to use this palette too much. As you can see, I mean, I've used the neutrals a lot. But yeah, this was a limited edition palette as well, so I kind of hate mentioning it because you might not be able to find it now. But this is the newest palette in my collection. Next question is the oldest palette in your collection, and that is this baby right here. I have done a ton of palette declutters. I actually just did one very recently on my channel, and this is one that I did declutter, but I pulled it out of the trash so that I could have it for this video because I wanted to show you guys. It's the Urban Decay Naked 3. The last time I tried to use this, I'm pretty sure the formula has gone bad. It's very patchy. It's not as pigmented as it used to be. It's kind of chalky. And I have a feeling if I just bought a new one, it would definitely be, you know, the quality that I remember. But I bought this before I even started making YouTube videos. That tells you how old this is. It's like 6 or 7 years old. It's old. Okay, next question is your most expensive palette. Well, that's this baby right here. This is by Natasha Denona. This is her Star palette. This is actually the first Natasha Denona palette that I ever purchased, believe it or not. Natasha Denona is kind of known for being a very expensive brand for eyeshadows, but I love her eyeshadows. I think they are worth every single penny. This particular palette has 18 pans. I know she has a bunch of the 15 pan palettes, which I'm actually gonna show you a couple of them here in a minute. And those ones retail for $129. This one is $169. She does have a couple of palettes that are a little bit bigger and a little bit more expensive, but this is one of the most expensive ones. I used this palette on my wedding day, so it does have a lot of like sentiment, and yeah, I really enjoy this palette. You could tell it's well loved. Look at that. Okay, next is your most affordable palette. I'm kind of cheating on this one a little bit because I mentioned before that I have a little bit expensive taste in eyeshadows. I just do. I really don't own a lot of drugstore eyeshadow palettes. Those are usually the first to be decluttered in my collection because the quality just is never as good as high-end, in my opinion. So I'm gonna throw this one in there. This is the Tartelette Toasted palette. This retails for, I want to say, like close to $40. Yeah, it's $39, but I got it for half off during Ulta's 21 Days of Beauty, so it was, what is that, like $18.50, something like that. So that's pretty cheap for me as far as palettes go. It is a good palette in my opinion. I like the Tartelette in Bloom a little bit better than the Tartelette Toasted, but I rarely buy palettes for cheaper than right around $25, $30. So $18 is like a steal in my opinion. Next is Show and Everyday palette. I picked this one right here by Tarte. It is their Man Eater palette. There's quite a few that I actually could have shown, but I'm using them for other categories. But this is pretty good. I've used this a lot. You can tell I've dug into pretty much all of these colors except for the darker ones many times. This palette smells really good. It smells like vanilla, by the way. It's the perfect size to travel with. I think you can throw it in your travel bag. It's not too big, it's not too small. You get a good variety of colors, and they are definitely everyday colors. You have some shimmers in here. You have a lot of really good mattes and a good variety of mattes, good crease colors, good all over lid colors. You could use some of the darker ones as eyeliner if you wanted to. Honestly, this is one of those palettes where if I don't know what I want to travel with and I'm just like in a rush packing my travel bag, I'll usually throw this in there because I know it works for everyday makeup. Okay, next is your most colorful palette. I had two that I was torn between, but I ultimately picked this one by Natasha Denona. It's her Tropic palette. Here is what it looks like inside. I mean, it's pretty dang colorful, right? You got a yellow, you got some purples, you got some blues, you got some greens, you got like these icy shimmery colors, you got some peaches and some reds. I mean, it's pretty dang colorful in my opinion. The other one I was kind of maybe considering was the Natasha Denona Love palette. You look at it and it is pretty monochromatic, but the color story is pretty colorful. You have reds, pinks, purples, blacks, silvers, tans, things like that. But I do think the Tropics palette is just a hint more colorful. It's kind of like looking at a rainbow. It is super fun. I don't use this palette as much as my other palettes, but it is really fun if you're going on like a beach vacation or you're just looking for that color that you, I mean, it has like a really pretty blue, you know, those pops of color. Definitely my most colorful palette. I don't have a lot of colorful palettes, but I do have that one. Next is your smallest palette. I'm gonna show this one right here by Natasha Denona. This is her little miniature palette, her 5-pan mini palettes. She does make palettes that are 5-pan. Oh, I can just show you one right here that are her full-size pans, and you can see how much smaller the miniature ones are. So these little teeny pans, I think they retail for $25, so actually not too bad. But I was torn between this and these little Kaja bento boxes. I wasn't sure if these would qualify as a palette because there's only 3 colors in them. So that's why I didn't pick this one, but this technically is my smallest as well. I thought somebody was opening my bedroom door. It sounded like it. I was like, next one is your biggest palette. A lot of people have been showing their Jaclyn Hill palette, and although that one is big, this one is bigger, but in a different way. This is very rectangular, whereas the Jaclyn Hill palette is almost like square-like. So this is by Too Faced. This was a limited edition holiday. Was it holiday? I don't know. It was limited edition, but it's their Now and Then palette. This thing is huge, you guys. Like, let me show you. Okay, let me show you in comparison to my smallest. Look at that. It's so big. Even in comparison to like a standard Natasha Denona, it's just so long. And I think because of that, I don't necessarily pull for this very often just because it is so big. You can't really travel with it or anything like that. But it is full of some really fun colors. This palette was Too Faced. They released it and it was like their original 10 colors, and then they reformulated them, revamped them, and gave you like the newer version of their original colors. Yeah, circa 1998, and then this was 2018, so it was a couple years old. But yeah, this one is definitely my biggest palette. Next is your palette with the best memory. I have a lot of memories with my palettes. I kind of tie makeup into certain memories, like my wedding day, for example. The palettes I used on my wedding day will always have a special place in my heart. I also think about palettes I used when I traveled to certain places, like my honeymoon, or certain beauty events, or when we went to New York for the first time, I brought my Tartelette and Bloom palette with me, or when I traveled home to Arizona to visit for my first Christmas away. Like, I just remember things like that. It's very odd, but this is the one I ultimately decided to throw in this video. It is the Pillow Talk Instant Eye Palette. So I received this as a PR gift from Charlotte Tilbury, and I'm a pretty small channel, as you guys can see. I don't get a ton of PR, and when I got that PR box from Charlotte Tilbury, I can't even put into words or explain how I felt. A brand like Charlotte Tilbury believed in me enough to send me the entire Pillow Talk collection. It's just, it's something that I will never forget ever. And this palette was in there. It is limited edition. It is still available now, but this particular palette, I don't know that I'll ever be able to part with it because it was part of that PR package. It's just something that holds a special place in my heart, and it makes me really, really happy. Charlotte Tilbury was already one of my favorite brands, but now that they gave me that PR box and they believe in me and they support my channel, it makes me love them even more. So for now, this is definitely my best memory. Okay, next is Worth the Hype. Speaking of Charlotte Tilbury, her little quads I think they're worth the hype. Are they expensive? Yes, they're expensive. They're $53 for 4 shadows, which makes them what, like $13 a shadow or something like that, if I just off the top of my head am doing math. That's a lot, but they are luxury eyeshadows. It's a luxury brand, and they are so good. The quality of her shadows, I think Charlotte Tilbury and Natasha Denona is a little bit better, but I have a lot of Natasha Denona in this video already, so I didn't want to put another one. The quality of Charlotte Tilbury is super good. These Pillow Talk palettes are being talked about a lot right now. I've been asked by you guys a ton which one I recommend, whether it be the Pillow Talk Quad, the Instant Eyeshadow palette, or the Darling palette, which I have right here. And I always say the Pillow Talk Quad because I feel like I use this one the most. These pinky beigey colors are really, really in right now, and this particular quad has a really good everyday color. This pink I love. This brown is a really good like deepening color, and then you have your glitter topper right here. I think they're worth the hype. I think the Charlotte Tilbury quads in general are worth the hype. I only own 2 of them. Actually, I own 3 of them. I got one in PR. But this one is my favorite, and it's talked about a lot, and I definitely think it's worth the hype. Next is not worth the hype, and for that I picked these little teeny e.l.f. bite-size palettes, I think is what they're called. Yeah, bite-size palettes. This one is cream and sugar. I also have rose water or rose quartz, the more like pinky one. These are being talked about so much on YouTube right now, and because of that I was like, well, I better try them out. They're only $3, right? And honestly, I think it was $3 flushed down the toilet, $6 because I bought 2 of them, because they're just not that great. They're not. And maybe this ties into my expensive taste in eyeshadows. These are nothing compared to like Charlotte Tilbury, Natasha Denona, Too Faced, Tarte. I mean, using those and then going to something like this, can I get away with a look? Of course. Could I use this if this was all I owned? Absolutely. You can get a decent look out of it, but you have to work with it. It takes a little bit longer. And I just don't think they're worth the hype that people are making them seem like they are up there with Natasha Denona, and like you can get this instead of this and it'll be the same. And like, I just don't think that they're that great. I know that sounds really bratty, but I just don't think they're that great. Okay, next is your favorite palette from your favorite brand. This baby right here. I talk about this a lot. I talk about this as like my top favorite palette ever. It really is. If I could pick one eyeshadow palette that I would have to have for the rest of my life and I had to get rid of every other eyeshadow palette, this would be the one that I pick. It's Natasha Denona Biba. This is her neutral palette, you guys, and it is really, really good. It has a good variety of cool tones and warm tones and neutrals. It has a lot of mattes. It has only 3 shimmers, but I think they're really well thought out shimmers. They're shimmers that I use a lot. I like the color Monroe, which is right here, a ton. I've dug into it a lot. Even my husband looked at this palette and he goes, you like the color Monroe, don't you? I was like, yeah. I know these palettes are expensive. I know the price tag is a hard one to swallow. Try to get them on sale when you can. When Sephora does their 20% off sales, if you can snag them then. A lot of times some of these will go on sale for 50% off on the Sephora site. Grab them then. But this one is definitely my favorite palette from my favorite brand. I think Natasha Denona does eyeshadows so well. So well. Okay, next is most used, and honestly a lot of the palettes I already showed you are my most used palettes. I use this one like crazy, the Biba palette. I use my Charlotte Tilbury quad like crazy. I use the Maneater palette all the time. So a lot of those are the ones that I use all the time, but in the effort to show you a new palette, I want to show you this one right here by Huda Beauty. This is her, what are they called? The Nude Obsessions. She came out with 3 of them. There's light, medium, and deep or dark or something like that. This is the light one. This, honestly, I have used this palette quite a bit this year. I bought it in January. I also bought it for my sister for Christmas in December. But as you can tell, I've dug into these colors quite a bit. Every time I wear these purples, I always get asked, wow, that's so pretty. What is on your eyes? It's always this. It's just such a pretty palette. If you take away the pops of color, it's just a really nice neutral palette. Because it is so small and the packaging is a nice hard plastic, it's really good to put in my everyday makeup drawer right here. I can just pop it out. It's easy to get ready with. Honestly, I've probably used this year just as much as I've used my Biba palette. Like, they're in the running together for how frequently I've used them. And these aren't too crazily priced. I think they're in the $30 range, $29 maybe. So I've had my eye on the medium and the deep as well. Okay, so that is the end of the categories for the original tag. I was watching Jessica Braun's video and she added 2 additional categories that I want to go ahead and show you guys as well. So the first one is the most underrated palette. I think this is the most underrated palette. This is discontinued, which is another one of her categories that I was going to put this in. You can't find this anymore. Sometimes you can find it at TJ Maxx or like Nordstrom Rack or things like that. But I think because it was so underrated and because people didn't use it very much, Too Faced was forced to retire it and discontinue it because they just weren't selling, which breaks my heart because it is such a good palette. It's the only cool toned chocolate bar palette, I think. Actually, they might have done a white chocolate palette recently, but this is, you know, the original cool toned chocolate bar palette from Too Faced. It's the only chocolate bar palette that I still own from Too Faced. I've decluttered the rest of them. Here's what it looks like. First of all, it's cute. The pans are heart-shaped. How cute is that? But I really do think that these cool beigey taupey browns are so pretty, especially if you have fair skin like me and cool undertones, like pinky undertones just in general. These types of colors look really pretty on your eyelids. I use these taupey, like this one, Almond Truffle right here. and cashew, and even like this burgundy brown. I use colors like that all the time. I think they just flatter my skin tone so well. And I just think that this palette was so underrated. I really do. I wish they didn't discontinue it because this is pretty old, and I will eventually, well, I would eventually like to repurchase it, you know, but I can't now. But I just think that this palette was so underrated. Poor thing, because it's so good. Okay, last one is limited edition or no longer available. You guys know I had to pop this in here somehow, some way. The Urban Decay Naked Original. Everybody knows the story behind this, right? Everybody knows they discontinued it. I went crazy. I went and bought it the day they announced they're discontinuing it. So this is my second Urban Decay Naked palette. They have since, like, I don't think you can find this palette anywhere unless you somehow find it at maybe like a TJ Maxx. I doubt it though. They released the Naked Reloaded in this one's place, and it's not the same at all. Like, not even. Why did you even try Urban Decay? It's not the same. But I just think that there's so many memories. This was the original palette. Like, this is the palette that started it all. I think most makeup junkies had this palette at some point. I know this was my first palette that I ever owned, like ever. So there's just so many memories behind it. Does it have the best color story? Well, I wish it had more mattes. It has a lot of shimmers. I wish it had more mattes. But it does have a pretty decent color story. I know in my original palette, I used up this pan Sin completely. I actually bought a single pan of Sin, used it up completely, and now I'm on my second single pan of Sin. So that's a color that I fell in love with. I hit pan on the color Virgin, I hit pan on the color Naked, the color Buck, and even the color Hustle I hit pan on in my original. So part of that was it was my only palette, so I was forced to use it every single day. But I'm just so sad that they discontinued this. All right, guys, well, that is the end of the palette tag. If you guys have done this tag, let me know in the comment section down below so that I can check it out, because I love watching these. I likely have already watched it if you've already made one, but just let me know. And yeah, I hope that you enjoyed, and I'll talk to you next time. Mwah. Bye.